This session is Defence Offsets and Technology Transfer, moderated by Matthew Cochrane, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Defence Services Marketing Council.
Assalamu alaikum and greetings. Welcome to the Global Aerospace Summit 2020 panel on the topic of UAE landed companies in defense, space, and security, building economic development. It's a 24-month milestone update with Tawazun Economic Council, and we'll explore the technology transfer and building the defense sector challenges and opportunities. My name is Matthew Cochrane from Defense Services Marketing Council, and I am honored to be your moderator today. Special thanks to our distinguished panel of experts from Tawazun Economic Council, Saab Emirates, Raytheon Emirates, Thales UAE, and Lockheed Martin. And of course, our organizers from Global Aerospace Summit 2020, as well as our hosts, Mubadala and Edge, and also a special thanks to the 1,000+ attendees that have signed up to watch this panel that now number over 1,000 companies and organizations represented in attendance today. The panel topic is UAE landed companies in defense, space, and security, building economic development. Before I turn to the panel to make opening remarks on the topic today, please allow me to introduce each briefly. His Excellency Matar Al-Romaithi, Chief Economic Development Officer at Tawazun Economic Council, Anna Corinne Rosen, Chief Executive at Saab Emirates, Alan Davies, Chief Executive Raytheon Emirates, Bernard Rowe, Chief Executive Officer, Thales in the UAE, and Robert Bob Harward, CEO, Middle East, Lockheed Martin. To the audience and attendees today, please find out more about our great expert panel by visiting their bios at our Global Aerospace Summit 2020 and Defense Services Marketing Council websites, or feel free to contact us after the event for more contact information. Our Global Aerospace Summit organizer will be running the technology side of things and will be recording this session. During these unprecedented times during COVID-19, and the new normal way of doing business is evolving with velocity every day, this panel will help us understand what UAE landed companies in defense, space, and security are doing with Tawazun Economic Development to continue building in the UAE and globally. These are the key stakeholders to learn from. We will explore the success stories and how we can work together on new offset and economic development projects in the UAE that will contribute to the wider industry ecosystem and enable the successful development of industrial partnerships globally. With that, I would like to have the first opening remark by Matar Al-Romaithi. Sir, over to you.
Well, thank you, Matthew, and I'm really happy to be part of this great esteemed panel. And tackling a very important point, landed company. And for those who doesn't know, the definition of landed company is 100% owned foreign company and become treated like a local company in UAE. This mark a very important milestone for Tawazun Economic Council. We were looking at a variety of ways of implementing offset policy, and at the same time attracting international players to be part of UAE economy. In addition to JVs, joint ventures, and different type of partnership, we've introduced landed company as a new way of enabling our partners to be local and treated to be a local company in UAE. And among us here, we have great stories to share and hear from the leaders of this industry. We are really happy for the government allowing us and trusting us to enable such relationship and partnership with our international friends and international partners. So I'm really happy today to discuss this, and I'll be, shedding more light on how we are treating this and how landed company became a tool to be used in developing further this industry.
Thank you very much, Matar. It's an honor to be with you and the panel today. Anna Corinne, may I turn it over to you, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Very pleased to see Mr. Mata and the panelists, my fellow CEO landed company partners. And I'd also like to very respectfully extend my greetings to all the participants of the Global Aerospace Summit. My name is Anna. I've been in the UAE for 3 years now. And when I arrived, I was the offset program director for Saab. And very early on, of course, these discussions regarding the landed company was starting. And I also very vividly remember we had an event in October in Abu Dhabi. It was the DCC, the Defense Contractors Council. And we talked about, at that point, we were right in the middle of starting up the landed companies. We were working with licenses and we were discussing the offset aspect of the landed companies and so forth. And at that point, I just like to remember a very special piece of memorabilia that I was handed over from Mr. Matar. And it was, I actually have it behind me here. It was a golden date seed. And I'd say that now we're 2 years down the road. And I believe that this seed has now grown into a plant. So for Saab, a lot of things has happened. And needless to say, I've learned a lot during these 2 years. And overall, I mean, the sentiment I had then, and I think I expressed it during this event, the DCC event, for Saab, the landed company as a vehicle for our continued growth is something we very much believe in, and that has certainly not changed for us 2 years down the road. We're still very pleased with this opportunity that was allowed to Saab as a defense contractor in the country to have a landed company, to have Saab Limited in this case then. And of course, I think emphasizing then as well as now, what's very important for us is the support from Tawazun and from Tawazun Economic Council. I mean, it wouldn't have been possible without all this government support. And I think it's very crucial for us moving forward as well. So I'm happy to be here today, to be in this panel. I expect to learn some from you guys, and I'm very happy to share some of my experiences. Thank you.
Anna, thank you so much, and thank you for reminding us all about the golden date seed. Alan from Raytheon Emirates, opening remarks, please.
Yes, thank you. So great to be here, Matthew. So thank you for having us, and it's always a pleasure to be with Matar and his presence, and actually be here with, as Anna said, you know, our partners and our colleagues. We're all in this together as the landed companies, and we do collaborate and learn from each other. You know, Matthew, you talked about unprecedented times. And I remember thinking when we started the landed company that was going to be unprecedented times. And I really missed that when we are truly in unprecedented times today. But as I've talked about in the past, you know, we are best as an industry when our back is against the wall. And we have to create, and we have to innovate, and we have to reinvent. And so one of the things that has happened as a part of this pandemic, it's been an accelerant to driving faster velocity around innovation and reinventing. You know, we've been a landed company for 2 years, and we've had to reinvent ourselves a little bit. You know, certainly as a defense contractor in the aerospace industry, that's always going to be one of the pillars of our company. But as we look forward and we continue to look at opportunities, in the past 2 years, the priorities and the technologies and the capabilities have changed here in the UAE, and we're pleased to be here in the UAE to be a part of that. And so as we move forward, you know, we'll continue to support the systems and solutions that we provide here for security and sovereignty, but we're more excited to be a part of the industry and the economies that are yet to come. And our goals remain the same. We want to develop Emirati knowledge-based leaders. We want to use technology and technology transfer. We want to invest in supply base, and we want to grow a business here that's an Emirati business that's servicing multiple sectors, multiple economies. And I think we'll all talk about this later, but the Abraham Accord opens up a whole new set of markets and capabilities for us. So, it's a pleasure to be here. It's an exciting time to be here. We're certainly feel honored and privileged to be one of the landed companies here. And we're looking forward to being a part of a very long-term relationship here and the legacy here in the community of the UAE and Abu Dhabi.
Alan, thank you very much for bringing up the subject of the export markets. We will be coming back to that and how that's growing for the UAE, made in the UAE products, getting even a wider reach than before. May I turn it now for opening remarks to Bernard, Thales in the UAE, please.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. I'd like first and foremost to thank the UAE authorities for the trust, and specifically His Excellency Matar Al-Homeiti for this invitation. Thales has been present for more than 45 years in the country, and we see this landed company as a reward in terms of trust and partnership in order to accelerate here our development in the country. We see actually an accelerator to the development of our strategy here in the country, the industry, industrialization, the innovation, as well as the education. And the landed company, Thales Emarat Technologies, is indeed the catalyzer of the deployment of this strategy. We aim at growing in all our sector here through Thales Emarat Technologies, of course, the defense and security activities, but we intend also to go beyond, creating centers of excellence, so sustainable in time, to address a market, not only specific project, market in the UAE, but also beyond that. So once again, I'd like to thank you. I'm very pleased to be here around my fellows CEOs of other landed companies. I think it's a fantastic adventure. It's a great vision we have all together to deploy. And maybe one last word about the meaning of landed company. We aim here at being part of an ecosystem. We aim here at fostering innovation. We aim here at being bridges between what exists already in our group and SMEs, startups, companies in the UAE. And that is only possible together with Emiratis, with engineers who will train, who will educate, contribute to educate with this asset, Thales Emarat Technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Bob, as the CEO for Lockheed in the Middle East, you're in many ways have been a leader across the way new partnerships are done here in the UAE. Can you tell us a little bit about in your opening remarks about the way that you see UAE landed companies and economic development going forward, please?
Yeah, great, Matthew. And Matar, first off, I gotta say thank you to you. Thank you for the personal invitation to be a part of this. I appreciate our partnership so much, and that's just indicative of the trust and confidence you have in us, so thank you. And Matthew, as always, the Global Aerospace Summit has always been a cornerstone of our engagement here in UAE. As you know, our CEO has always been here to speak. Unfortunately, we couldn't in this period, but it no way diminishes the commitment we have to this forum or the commitment to the partnership. So yeah, I think that's an important part you just raised, Matthew, as I look at this group where you have Raytheon, where you have Thales, where you have Saab. We've all been partnered here in UAE for many, many years, me personally 7 years, and we're all committed to building the industrial base. And we've done that through a plethora of means, but this new tool will allow us to build and grow that in an enduring fashion, regardless of shifts in policies. So again, but it's just one tool again. And we all have to be creative, smart, and looking at using these very valuable assets, be it offset, to build that industry. And so as we look at our companies in the terms we have here, landed companies, how do we make that as effective as possible? And that's what we're focused on. We've had our Center for Innovation and Security Solutions here for 7 years. In my mind, it may not meet the title of a landed company, but we've used that as a tool here to build, to bring all our best technology to bear. And now we're focused on what I think is the most important aspect, human capital. But it's going to take all of us thinking creatively to build on these bases and create instruments that really contribute to the industrial base here in UAE going forward. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.
Bob, thank you very much. And we're going to get back to that Emiratization and human capital building in just a moment. The first question, I want to turn back to Anna because you brought up the golden date seed at the beginning of this. Let me walk back a couple of years. In October 2018, at the annual DCC meeting in Abu Dhabi, the Tawazun landed company concept was announced, with Saab and Raytheon Emirates being the first to be named by Matar and Tawazun Economic Council at the time. Matar remarked that this was adding tools to the economic development opportunities made possible by Tawazun Economic Council, bringing to light the potential for collaboration among the local and international content of the defense program in the UAE. Tawazun encouraged our industry members to participate and learn about the new environment and players in our ecosystem. So this was October 2018. Flash forward 2 years later, and can you talk a little bit about how you have ramped up, what were some of the challenges, the barriers, but then of course some of the opportunities to effectively bring technology or build technology here as a UAE landed company? And then we'll turn it over to the other panelists.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. I'd be happy to. Yeah, like you said, I had a look at what we talked about at that point, and to then reflect on what has happened in the meantime. And it's almost hard to decide where to start, actually, because it is what we did was to really start from scratch and build up a new entity. I mean, obviously, we have the greater Saab in the background, and we have that support from the bigger organization. But from everything from getting the licenses and getting the legal structure in place, to start hiring people, to get into the facilities in a good way, obviously deciding what to do in this new landed company. That was not a given. It was a bit of a funny happenings in that sense, that the first decision from Saab was that, yes, we will start a new company in the UAE. And then the second question was, what are we going to do in this company? So I think those large areas were the ones that were, well, quite fundamental to start and decide upon, and not always that easy. What I think I'd like to emphasize a bit on, and I know we will probably talk quite a bit more on it, it is the what I would say turned out to be the biggest challenge in all this, and that is human resources. And it's a little bit particular, I suppose. I know that our landed companies have taken somewhat different routes and different priorities. We decided early on that we will start with a development project. And then, of course, if you want to start a development project, it becomes very key to find those particular competencies, those experts in those areas that you want to build up. And to find the right resources and build the right team, I think has been a challenge.
Anna, thank you. Matar, when you hear this, it must feel encouraging to know that the challenge that you laid down 2 years ago, that so much work and so much time has has been developed. Is the challenge, is the model working?
Well, it is a good question. I can tell you from different business plans that we reviewed from the landed companies. I can tell you it was a new experience for everybody, but the model been maturing, over the last 24 months. So I can tell you there are great opportunities ahead of us. Of course, there are challenges like human capital. Human capital is I believe it's everywhere to find the right, skill set at the right time. So we started as Tawazun to look into this seriously, and we've launched a seeds program to develop and to enable our partners to select from a pool of engineers as an internship program. And then they could, from the 3 to 6 months internship program, they could select the right candidate for them. We are trying to do some of these solutions. And of course, as any normal business, you would face challenges of getting the right, the business plan to work, first of all, and to get the right people in a place. So this is a normal challenges that you might face in any businesses. However, I think it is a very much encouraged concept that most of the defense contractors now are talking to us. And as you remember, I have limited numbers of golden seeds.
I do remember that. And I know many of people that are fighting for the 5th, 6th, 7th seed. Alan, Mahtar just talked about a really big success, and it has to be highlighted. The internship program, seeds. Whenever I look on the announcements that Raytheon Image are making, I think it was just last week I saw you standing with a new group of young recruits in your office, all very socially distanced, all had your face masks on, but you were still getting back to work and you were still working on human capitalization. Can you talk about how you're expanding your focus on localization and sustainability and training?
Yeah, so I will tell you, Matthew, the most exciting days and the most rewarding days for me as I've been here in the UAE is getting acquainted and being able to be exposed to some of the talent that is here in the UAE. And so this is our second group of interns that we've brought in, and the energy and the excitement and the skill sets they bring are phenomenal. The first group, we actually were able to pick up 2 of them and hire them, provide full-time employment for them. We're excited about this group. And, we recognize that as we start to move forward with the landed companies, I call kind of year 1 was the planning, the administrative part of establishing the business here, getting the license in place, getting the headquarters established. We've started to develop this pipeline of business and opportunities working with Mahtar's team. We have some incredible projects we have planned. Certainly the merger of Raytheon and UTC has helped with that. We're now 50% commercial, 50% DoD, 50% domestic, 50% international. So we have this incredible portfolio and a whole host of technologies that we want to bring here. When we bring those here and we develop those opportunities, we have to have human capital. And so we have really changed our focus to the development of that human capital. And the best place to develop is early on in the universities. And so we've got 7 very talented interns that have a lot of energy. I met with them for almost 2 hours the day they came in, full of questions. And even given the restrictions of working from home, we've got them laptops, we've got an agenda and people lined up to work with them and talk to them. And they have become accustomed, more so than us, to working in a virtual environment. And so while we're thinking we're helping them, they're actually helping us. And that relationship and partnership where we can exchange lessons, tools, and experiences is going to be vital. And so I'm encouraged from what we see. Their capability, their energy is eye-watering, and we're anxious to bring them into the business. We're anxious to start executing to some of these opportunities we have and complete some of the goals and aspirations that I know Mahtar and Tawazun have expectations for, and more importantly, satisfying our expectations as well.
Alan, thank you. And that young blood is really part of that momentum, that velocity that we see moving during COVID. When you have the ability to launch the Hope probe, when you're able to do these things in the UAE, it's certainly on the backs of the generations that came before, but certainly the young generations that are really reaching for the stars. And it's very encouraging to see how much has been accomplished. Bernard, Alan talked about this briefly, but bringing technologies to the UAE, could you talk a little bit about which technologies Thales is seen as a priority to bring to the UAE, either through the landed company or starting from scratch here in the UAE?
Yes, with pleasure. Indeed, first I'd like to highlight that UAE is a land of opportunities. There is a vision from the highest authorities, and at Thales we are here to humbly contribute to the deployment of this vision. And once again, we set up this strategy relying on the development of industry, innovative industry. And last but not the least, all that is possible through people. And bringing technologies here, it's not only transferring, it's also developing, creating. For that's why we believe strongly in this contribution to the education system, to contribute to support the education system in the UAE in order to bring our added value in certain areas, such as radar technologies, communication systems, and others beyond, touching also civil technologies. This is very important to us to start with that, because this could be a challenge indeed to find the right people at the right moment in the right organization. But this is, I would say, a usual case. It's nothing surprising. It's the duty of a manager to find the right competencies in order to deploy the organization. And developing this, having this contribution in education, we chose to start with artificial intelligence. We brought our value in Sorbonne University and so also MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed University for AI, in order to launch, to initiate, to bring our contribution in this domain with various applications, which would be defense, security, digital security, and so on and so forth. And this is the root. This is the seed, indeed. Now, coming to transfer of technology, at Thales, we strongly believe here specifically that it's more development of new technologies that we need to have in Thales Emarat Technologies. We need to bring experts here, people, the right people, who are able to invent the future technologies in the domain I mentioned before. So once again, rather than transferring existing technologies, we intend to create here from the UAE to address a market in UAE, beyond GCC, beyond also, and the value is people. So once you have the right people, there is a foster between the youth generation, the experts we could bring, and then they will create. And they will create, for sure, embarking the ecosystem. The SMEs, which are existing in the country, or the startups, just an idea, which could be brought on the table, Thales could support according to various criteria. We are here to, I would say, as a catalyzer, as an enabler, rather than as a ready-made technology brought here to the country. We strongly believe in the development of seeds rather than transplanting, if I can use this metaphor, a ready-made tree.
Bob, thank you, Bernard. And I like the analogy. We have to keep the seed and the growing seed going throughout this. I have a feeling the palm tree behind me was not intended, but it's a good prop nonetheless. Bob, can I turn to you and with your vast experience, and Lockheed has not only transferred technology effectively to the UAE, but you've also built brand new technology. And can you talk about what's worked best for Lockheed? What do you see working well in the future? We just need you to turn your mic on.
I have two mics. Okay, sorry about that.
You're good to go.
Yeah, so Matthew and Bernard, I think both of you hit it exactly right. We've been doing this so long that our golden seed is actually a golden tree now, and it's spawning those other seeds. And I'd like to take you a little bit through this path because I think that's important. When you look at our Center for Innovation and Security Solutions, when we first introduced it, our goal was to introduce all the technology that Lockheed Martin had into UAE. So we wanted to introduce, demonstrate, and inculcate our technology and our people, our scientists and our engineers into our partners' systems and programs. And along the way, we started the internship program, and we're just about to cross the line where we've had over 100 interns pass through those programs. They were focused on space programs, robotics, drones, radars, and other numerous commercial technology that applied in and out of the defense market. And it was ironic, to a point Bernard made, all of those interns, when we talked to them when they finished, they all wanted to go out and start a company, build a company around the technology that they now owned. So in our intern programs, whether they were working drones where they built, we assisted them, we partnered them with our engineers, and they built and patented technology that they owned. So our challenge going forward as we take these interns, we've now hired those interns. My technical assistant is a graduate. Hala Al-Ghazarian, who's running CISS now, is a graduate of that. So our challenge is going to be, although they'll all want to go out and build their own companies, we want to bring them into the defense industry norm and align them to those programs so that we can replace our engineers with them, and that they will know those technologies are most applicable to the customer because they'll be involved from the cradle to the grave, the whole life and endurance. And they're not only there to support, build, modify those programs, but witness and understand what technologies they can leverage from Lockheed Martin into their own system that they then can own and build on. So I think those seeds are wide and varied. They're still maturing, but I think this final steps of then being the engineers who are running these programs is really what's going to pay the biggest dividends to all of us.
Well, and Bob, this brings up a really important point. I'm going to turn to Matar here, but I remember 20 years ago when you would meet young Emirati students, they may have received a scholarship from an oil and gas company. They may have received a scholarship from a government institution. But if you brought them out on nights and weekends to work on robotics, or if you brought them out to work on unmanned aerial vehicles, they were excited, but they didn't know where to go. And so they became Emirates pilots, or they went into the police, or they went to the oil and gas company, but they always had this in the back of their mind. I could have had a company. And it sounds like, flash forward 20 years later, this is happening. Matar, I was going to ask the question of the panel about, as a UAE landed company, does the local environment have structures in place to protect domestic IP? But I think as we've listened to the panelists, it's clear in varying ways that it does. And and really leaning forward into advanced research and development is where UAE landed companies and UAE Emiratis are headed. Can you talk about your view on that, your vision for that?
Sure. I think, among, well-experienced companies here in this panel, I can tell you, they have a very rigorous legal team who will review every single process to make sure that their IPs and their rights are protected. So in UAE, we pay attention to every single detail to make sure that our partners, they feel treated fairly. And, it's not just Tawazun we're talking about, it's a whole ecosystem in UAE. If you're talking about, control of IP to make sure that, whether it's a UAE, I would say IP, or, we are the beneficiary of those IPs, there is a clear procedure and clear processes and entities responsible for that. I see Robert has something to say. Bob?
Matar, I think that's one of the most pertinent facts. And it was interesting, I think this is important, everybody went through this, how we protect that IP, not only Emirati IP, but US IP is a critical component on this. And I think you all realize the US government last year came out and did a very intensive inspection, and UAE got straight A's across the board that they're able to protect that technology, US technology, and fashions that are going to be even more important as we move on to these more advanced technologies that are now going to be available because of the Abraham Accord. So we're all in just this most dynamic period, but I'm so encouraged by what Tawazun, GHQ, Edge, and everyone is doing to align those processes to ensure we are all protecting everyone's technology and IP. And it's going to be more important than ever before, and really a direct signal to what direction UAE is going.
Alan and Anna, the two panelists today that have the oldest announced landed companies, can you talk a little bit about how you're valuing the made in the UAE content? In other words, if you make something and you have generated new IP and you're sourcing products off of the local market, how do you value that? Is that, from 10 to 100? How do you go about the valuation of the IP, but also the made in the UAE content that you're aiming for? Anna, can I start with you?
Yes, no, this is definitely something that is something we talk to different stakeholders about. As you know, our approach is kind of like Bernard has been saying, that we create the IP in the country. And I'd also like to mention in this context that we are planning not just to create IP and do development purely on our own. For Saab, partnerships with future collaboration, if it is industry partners or if it is university partners or research entities, that is something we strive actively for because it's a model we believe in. But then, of course, the whole issue of IP creation becomes very important. But saying that, it is that we then deem that all the IP that will come out of Saab, in collaboration or not, will be UAE developed IP from scratch. So of course then we think that all the engineering hours that go into that, the whole structure with the company setup that go into that, we value that very high. I'm not sure exactly where to put it on a scale from 1 to 100, but for sure rather high. And then since the offset aspect of this is that to claim credits on future revenue and so on, the made in the UAE stamp, which is then governed by the Ministry of Economy, becomes essential. So that's where we have these discussions. Is that creation of the design of the engineering side of things, how do we value that? because it is easier in a sense to take the actual product and look at where does the parts that build up the product, where do they come from and what value do they have. But we really need to take into account the value of the creation of the IP. So I would value that very high on the scale.
And Alan, we're maybe talking about two things here, because we have Emiratization staffing levels. That's one thing. And then what are we bending steel? Are we creating composite structures? Are we utilizing excess capacity and capability that's already in Emirati factories today and bringing up the product side? So we have a human side and we have a product side. How does Raytheon Emirates view that?
So I think there's a couple angles that we should come in at this from. First, we absolutely want to be able to utilize any idle capacity here in the UAE, whether it's bending metal circuit cards, harnesses, you name it. That's a fundamental goal. When we start thinking about IP and technology, we want to make, I mean, there's a lot of incredible IP out there. There's a lot of incredible technology out there. But if it doesn't have a home, if it doesn't have a place in a product, and if that product doesn't generate revenue here in the UAE, and if it doesn't employ Emiratis, and if it doesn't use the supply base here, then it's not going to have the highest degree of valuation. It doesn't have to be the coolest technology to have the highest valuation. It's got to be the right technology that satisfies the goals and the desires here in the UAE, but more importantly, something that can be productized and then exported out of the UAE, so it has that brand made in the UAE. And we want to move away from having the restrictions and the limitations on bringing in the US technology, because that's all driven by the State Department. We want to work in coordination here with our partners to help develop indigenous capabilities and technologies that move them forward where they want to go with their industrial goals.
Well, and that's really about that offtake potential that was brought up earlier. The region for made in the UAE goods, whether it's the Saudi Arabian market or the wider global market, we see an Edge company has been successful in selling formerly Caracal rifles to the Bundeswehr. We're seeing made in the UAE products export around the world now. Bernard, coming back to Thales in the UAE, you mentioned making new IP in the UAE. And can you talk a little bit about that export potential? What's the marketplace that you see a made in the UAE technology going? Bernard, sorry, you're on mute still.
If I come back, yeah, sorry. If I come back on the word made in UAE, meaning it's for us a golden ticket, a golden recognition. It means that we have deployed the right strategy to reach that level for our centers of excellence. It's not only a product, it can be also competencies which are recognized as such. It can be systems, it can be services, it can be much beyond simple, I would say, product and hardware. When we talk about markets, it's not only UAE, it can go far beyond. I would say there is no limit when we talk about market which could be addressed from the UAE. What we intend to do is to develop new capabilities to address future technologies, to address future market from the UAE. It means that in the coming future, as long as we have our centers of excellence up and running, we are starting now, we could address a need which can be 10,000 kilometers from here, but where a part of what we are going to deliver is made here in UAE. The scope of work will be made here in UAE. So you see that the possibilities are much wider than just developing from Thales Emarat technologies and addressing one given market. It's the whole Thales group who is addressing a market and who can rely on certain technologies about what is made in UAE. And this is the strength, this is the strategy we are adopting. We don't want from the UAE to address with our teams here only to address the market. We rely on all the Thales teams, and a part, which can be from X to 100% of the scope, will be made here. This is our vision, actually. And for that, we start with 2 centers of excellence: radar technologies, system of communication. But it goes beyond these 2 specific domains of application, because you have, for these centers of excellence, common capabilities and mainly digital capabilities. So you see that when you start and when you're getting mature to deliver what you intend to deliver with this center of excellence, you could grow and you could have other seeds to grow capabilities to address other markets. And I'm thinking about civil as an example.
Bernard, thank you. Matar, I want to go back to something you told me probably 10, I'm really dating it, maybe 15 years ago. And you said offsets, Matthew, is not about how much credit you're getting. It's about, is this a good business plan? And if it's such a good business plan, go out and build the business and maybe we'll get some offset credit for it. But it was always one of these things that I remember telling DSMC members and clients, don't focus on offsets as credits. Go out there and focus on building a good business, not just for your company and for your people, but for the UAE. And then the offset projects and credits will come out of that. There are examples throughout the UAE, but Matar, let me ask you today, where is the place for the offsets programs now that we see the successful launch after 2 years of landed companies? You're adding these to these successes, things like the Tawazun Fund, the Tawazun Bank, the Seeds program. And every year there's a new tool in the toolbox that Tawazun Economic Council is coming out with. Can you talk about the place of offset programs and what the partnerships of the future will look like?
Sure. A small correction, I would say, when we talk about, a business case, if defense contractor thinks of any project as from business perspective, definitely they will get their offset credit because, we are built around that. And, economical impact is essential. And if the company is investing on a business that is profitable, that, hire UAE national, having, certain capabilities in the country, I think, we are all winning. Those projects contribute to GDP, and at the same time, companies are enjoying expanding their business and footprint. To your point, I think going forward, we are, agnostic when we take a look at the challenges. And most of these, by the way, ideas came as a solution from hearing our partners out. When they come to us and they say, okay, there is a certain challenge in, only creating JVs, for example, in the past. We looked at different ways and we've introduced work packages, different type of partnerships. Now, with Seeds, we're looking at also landed companies. So all of that came as a result from, and I like Alan's comment when he said, once we are pushed, our back toward the wall, we try to find solution. And I believe, all of us, we were pushed to actively look at these opportunities. When you are back, touch the wall, you need to find a way to breathe and move and push things around. And if you're thinking of traditional offset, I think, people who are looking at it as a tax. We are looking at it as a business enabler. And whatever tool, whatever mechanism that will enable us to grow together, definitely you will see UAE implementing this, first. So we are, against time to really move fast and working together in a very balanced approach. That's where Tawazun name came from, is creating a balance, and fair deals.
Picking up on that, Bob, Matar talked about coming to Tawazun Economic Council with challenges, and sometimes when you have your back up against the wall, like Alan said, you come up with innovative ideas. If there's any fighter on this panel, it's you, Bob. So can you talk about, what would be then some of those challenges you want to bring to Matar? Don't give away all the secrets, but what are some of the things that you might envision in the next 2 years between these summits, and I'm sure we'll meet many times in between, but what are some of those things that you want to move with great velocity and great momentum within the Tawazun Economic Program?
Matthew, that's just a brilliant question because of where we are today. And again, I consider myself more a lover than a fighter, but I am very competitive. And I would tell you, in where we are today, especially because of the Abraham Accord, and you saw Bahrain followed suit, and I suggest and believe other countries will follow suits very quickly in the region. But because of that, I believe we're going to be able to share our most sensitive and advanced technologies and capabilities. And I think the region will explode with business within the region that then makes it even more attractive globally. But here's, and I hate to be a buzzkill, so to speak, but something we should all consider. When we know there are nation states out there who, as a foreign policy, encourage the pilfering of technology, they encourage illegal cyber activity. We're all going to have to be very sensitive to that, and we're going to have to be very smart as we build these ecosystems from not just product, but now the people who will cross both those lanes within UAE and others, how we protect that. And that's going to take all of our effort. And as I look at this group here, we've all been doing this together. This is a great team. We all operate collectively. We're pretty open. We're transparent each other. But boy, we're going to have to be smart to make sure we protect that IP and that technology. And because this opportunity created by this peace accord is just going to change the region in ways we've never seen before within the region, and the opportunity in and out of the region. So we need to be very sensitive and understanding, and that's the biggest challenge I see moving forward, Matthew.
Thank you, Bob. Alan, before I turn back to Anna and Bernard, can you pick up on that point? Raytheon Emirates is one of the largest defense contractors in the UAE. And Raytheon has built a substantial backlog of building a technology that is being transferred and growing in the UAE. How are you protecting that? How are you being smart, as Bob says, in protecting that technology?
Bob mentioned earlier we had a U.S. government audit, and we, passed with flying colors, straight A's, which is really the cornerstone for us to continue to be able to transfer technology here. And certainly we are, strong partners here in the UAE, but more importantly, it's a very strong relationship with the Department of State and the export controls and ITAR organizations back in the US. Being able to protect that technology is not only paramount to the US, but it's paramount here in the UAE. And we want to make sure that their security and their sovereignty is not jeopardized by any sloppiness, if you will, in handling the IP. And so we continue to move technologies here in support of many of the systems that we have here. As we move forward as a landed company, we certainly have some indigenous programs here that we want to develop, that we have plans for, that take technology from the US, but also some technology here that's unique to the UAE. And Matar, you know, we know that program that is a UAE branded program. And so it's a shared responsibility on both sides to protect that IP and protect that technology. And it's not something that we take lightly. One of the first hires we had here in the UAE was an export controls officer and a technology officer, because we have to ensure that we have the right protocols in place to sustain that protection of the IP.
And Anna and Bernard, from a European perspective, these controls, these export controls, are just as stringent. And international traffic and arms regulations certainly touch each of us if you have an American component, and depending on Department of State, Department of Commerce regulations. But from a European perspective, also, you're protecting your technologies and growing these technologies. Anna, how is Saab working? As Bob said, we're moving into it, and with some momentum, a new era in the region. And it would be great to understand from Saab and maybe from a European perspective, what is your view on that, and how are you protecting your technologies that you're making here in the UAE?
Well, I can only, first of all, then agree with what Alan said, that one of the first things we did as well within the landed company is to make sure we have a dedicated person who looks at the export control issues, I think, and how we regulate that moving forward. Of course, we've got a lot of experience with that, because coming from Sweden and the focus that is in Sweden on export control and protecting that core IP, and so we bring that with us. But I think the other focus is that working closely, of course, together with Tawazen and together with the government here, learning how those regulations are in place, so that we trust them. Of course, that when we work together with partners and you sort of open yourself up a little bit, we choose them carefully and work closely with them.
I think that's an important point about choosing your partners carefully. Bernard, French President Macron has been an advocate, if not a leading voice, within NATO. And NATO is certainly a marketplace for made in the UAE goods. What is your take on the ability to leverage the UAE and the French, if not the EU and the NATO relationship in this sector?
You named it. There is very strong links between France and UAE. This is true for the authorities. This is true for Thales, as well as mentioned, because we have been present here for more than 45 years. So we are very close and aware about the rules, what can be done, what cannot be as well. There are discussions in that respect, and we follow strictly the regulations. That's obvious. This is a must. Now, of course, we work differently with France rather than other people. So it's very important to know, to understand who are the partners, who are the companies you are working with, in terms of co-contracting, in terms of subcontracting, or even prime contractorship. And for that, I think the UAE authorities have done a fantastic job to make sure that we arrive here in UAE with experts, with technologies, sometimes using background IP, which is strictly also regulated, to arrive in a safe environment. And we can use this word safe, safety in many other domain or application in UAE. This is one of the key for which people, company, are coming to the UAE. So I'm sure about the deployment of the vision of the country, that it will be done in a safely manner, in a safely way for both the people and companies. So we have a first sight of course, excellent trust on what's going to be here in UAE for our IP and all the safety part to protect our people, our capabilities, and so on. This is something which is very important, and it comes, the root base, it comes from all the history between France, UAE, but also Thales, as Thales is not only relying on French capabilities, all the other governments where Thales is based as a country of origin is also something very important.
Bernard, thank you for that. And before Bob, yes, Matar, please.
Well, I think it's a very good point that we need to literally also shed some light of the government, efforts. I'm personally being part of G2G discussions where, we try to facilitate and find, ways to help our partners to transfer certain technologies to UAE, and by sharing with the government, their respective governments, our ways and procedures, and some plans on working collectively. And some of these initiatives is actually working collaboratively as two governments to develop certain technologies. So I think it is a hot topic, I would say, that protecting the rights and IPs. However, in UAE, I believe we have a strong mechanism and ways and strong relationships with different government-friendly nations to attract more opportunities that jointly we can benefit from. So I believe, to your point, Bob, you were talking about specific cases. I believe we are as Tawazun, and also if you look at UAE, we take everything seriously, and and put a clear plan to resolve these issues. If there is something that delay or stop certain cooperation, you would see us jumping in and finding a quick solution for that, either if it's require certain clarification or certain review in a way of doing things.
It's really an important point, and this government-to-government relationship, the industry relationship, the academia relationship, all of the multiple layers that Tawazun Economic Council has supported industry has been so important. We have so many more questions that have come in, and I know that we could go for another hour, if not another day, to talk about robotics and space and digitalization and so many things that Tawazun Economic Council is challenging us on. But sadly, we're going to turn to closing remarks, and we're going to start off with Bob and work our way backwards, and Matar will give you the last word. But Bob, can you share with us, in summary, what you hope the takeaway is for those that are attending this Global Aerospace Summit panel? It's always a special time to get together every 2 years, and as you said, Lockheed's CEO has always presented, but we see each other on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and so what's the key message that you want those that are tuning in once every 2 years to take away and learn from the success of UAE offsets and landed companies' potential?
Well, Matthew, it's simple, and I think Matar captured it well. It's the partnership. This is a partnership more so than business enterprise, because the ramifications of our work sure, we all have companies that have shareholders, we're after profit, but we're really addressing national security of UAE and our countries at large. And so the partnership is just so important. And back to Matar's last point, indicative of how important the partnership is to UAE and how proactive they are, they reorganized GHQ several years ago to ensure that audit that Alan mentioned would get straight A's. What other country does that? They wanted to align their processes and procedures from procurement to end user with our systems and processes, indicative of how important the partnership is to them and how important it is to us and all our companies. So that's the focus. We're all in this for the long haul. We have deep relationships, but this is truly a collective partnership that we've all got to stay committed to. And that's what makes it so exciting and so fun as we go forward, because we're working with people we believe and trust so much. So Matthew, again, thank you for letting me be a part of this. And Matar, thank you. It's good. The future's going to be so bright that we all need to get sunglasses here pretty soon.
Thank you, Bob. Very encouraging and positive message. Bernard, may we have your closing remarks and what you hope not only to leave people thinking about Thales, but the potential in the UAE and how you've realized that potential.
UAE is a land of opportunity for the business and beyond. As a takeaway, I would say simply that I encourage all the companies to focus on how they could contribute to the development, economic development, industrial innovation, and also the education in the UAE. This is really important in terms of recognition. We feel here that at any step, we are not alone. We are surrounded by support, help, advice, guidelines, and you name it. Tawazun is really an enabler to help us as companies beyond Thales to develop our activities here and to develop our people, to develop our teams, to create, to innovate, to differentiate also our approach. I could indeed speak many more minutes about what is really innovative in the approach of business here in UAE, but indeed, innovation is not only technology, it's also the way to think, the vision. And maybe one last word about what is happening worldwide as the sanitary measures, this COVID-19 is impacting all of us. This moment is also an opportunity to rethink the way we work, to rethink the market we address, to rethink with our partner, with our friends, how we can become stronger after all of that is finished, or even during this period of time. So we have to take that as an opportunity, and I think we are lucky here to have a great vision and great support. I would say great consideration and great rewards. So this is the place to be. That's just as a sum up what I should say, and I would encourage all companies, even panelists who are other companies who are not here today in the panel, to come to UAE to contribute to this economic development. And we would be happy at Thales to envisage any, I would say, fruitful mutual contribution in order for them to be part of our value chain, either as subcontractor, co-contractors, and to foster together the industrial ecosystem.
Bernard, thank you very much. And really, everyone is picking up on that partnership theme, which makes the UAE such a special place to be here and be a part of. Alan, let me turn it over to you for closing remarks, please, from Raytheon Emirates.
Yeah, so again, Matthew, thank you for hosting this, and it's always, again, a pleasure to be with Mahtar and our partners here. And I'll tell you this, if I was going to walk away from something here from this panel, I'd hope you walk away with a couple things. One, there's really not a better time to start to establish business and be a part of the UAE economy and a part of the made in the UAE. You know, clearly all of the processes to safeguard information and technology are in place. You know, I think it is a great problem to have that we need to develop Emiratis. You know, it's one of the things that I know Bob enjoys every day. It's one of the things that we enjoy as a company here at Raytheon. And so we're going to start to develop and utilize that talent pool here. And we talked about this concept of seeds. And as you sit back and you think about the concept of seeds, you know, we're going to build a legacy here. You know, this is not a offset transactional arrangement. We're building a company, and we're going to plant seeds as landed companies here, and we're going to grow a tree, and we may not be able to sit under that tree when it matures, but we'll have been at the grassroots of when we established that and planted that seed. And so this is a long-term play. This is about establishing legacies, and far beyond all of our terms here in the UAE, these companies will continue to grow, sustain, and provide the value that the UAE is looking for. And that is a very exciting place to be.
Alan, well said, and I'm looking forward to seeing that tree grow. You've been all very gracious with your time, and Anna, I think the tree behind you is growing. You kicked us off today reminding us about that golden date palm seed that sits behind you and how it's been growing. Please, your closing remark and your perspective from Saab Emirates, please.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, Saab is established now in the UAE. Saab is here to stay, and Saab is here to grow. That is my strong conviction. And I can just say, Alan, here to what you're saying. We are kicking this off, but it is really just the beginning. And I mean, we've looked today at certain areas of where we can, you know, we've been put against the wall, we find solutions, and it's about the IP creation, it's about the legal setup, it is about the human capital. I mean, all these things we will address. And I think with these opportunities that are here, and having that incentive to have everything business driven, I mean, that's the key to that long-term success. And I think if we continue to do that, we continue to work together, we build together this ecosystem. By the way, I apologize for the sound effects in the background. I'll slowly kill my neighbor who decided to do construction after this meeting. But let's see the sound effects to the building we're actually doing, to create that ecosystem of not just the industry, not just our parts, but also academia, building that up. Also, together with the government, find these where we need perhaps to change some things to make this even more profitable. Because if we do manage to become profitable, yes, I know it's a nuisance, that's when you can really give back to society as well. If you can find that win-win setup where the companies are doing well, we will hire more people. We will need to evolve that supply chain. And I mean, one thing gives another. And that's what I'm really thrilled to be part of forming in the UAE. So also, thank you, Mr. Mahtar, for this opportunity and for what your country is allowing us to do. I am honored to be part of it. Thank you.
Mahtar, I have to give you the last word. And just before I do that, today's panel, when I first came to the UAE and I learned about the greening of Abu Dhabi and this project that the founding father had of planting trees, and now looking today and listening to these seeds that you started to give out 2 years ago are now turning into this small forest, everything ties back to the beginning. And so congratulations. It's a privilege to be on this panel again with you and the landed company participants. And really where where do you see the future, and what do you hope people learn from today's panel?
First of all, let me thank everyone here participating for their trust and cooperation. You know, I believe we went through some challenging times. You know, we were also negotiating. Sometimes there are, challenges for both of us. We try to find our way around them and, successfully solving them to move forward. So I believe the small forest is only the start, and I believe we're dealing with well reputable international companies that they care about the growth of their own business. So again, landed company is a great tool for companies who are really serious about their expansion. Nothing different than whatever business we're gonna do. It is tackling the supply chain, tackling the human factor, human capital factor, tackling also the points of, development, IPs, technology transfer. All of this is a bundled and a small towards landed company. It is, if it's successful, I would say it is based on two ways of cooperation between the companies and, Tawazun in this case, and also the government in general. So it is a great start. It is only 2 years, and we see big companies signing up for this. And I think it is so encouraging. And I believe, a few years ago, or 5 years ago, if you look at, someone would come to you and say, okay, UAE will be manufacturing parts that will, be part of aircraft. Nobody, would say, yeah, it is possible. Today, we are exporting over 6.5 billion worth of, products that is going to aerospace. So it is encouraging, and I believe we live in a very attractive time and transformational time that we need to take advantage of. So it is an opportunity, and we are grabbing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matar. And again, my thanks, Matar, Bernard, Anna, Alan, Bob. Thank you very much for your time today. And a special thanks, of course, to your companies, Tawazun Economic Council, Saab Emirates, Raytheon Emirates, Thales UAE, Lockheed in the Middle East, and again, our hosts, Mubadala and Edge, as well as the organizers of Global Aerospace Summit 2020, and not to forget the 1,000+ participants and attendees today. We hope that you've learned more about UAE landed companies in defense, space, and security, and how they're helping to contribute to the economic development in the UAE. And we hope to welcome you back here in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi. And until then, thank you, shukran, masalama.
Thank you.
Thank you.